Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
I'm beginning to think you don't like me anymore,
Oh, no,
Susan.
why?
Well,
I do.
Yes.
But I want to know why you're concerned.
It was the traffic on the way in. It was awful.
I'm sorry. How long was the commute?
1 hour and 30 minutes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There had to have been an accident
Well,
somewhere.
when I got in, I finally found out. My GPS, by the way, kept on saying, turn here, turn here, turn here. But everything was like red, red, red. I couldn't get out of it. It was a mess. So as soon as I came in, I went to the assignment desk and found out that there was a rollover in the middle of the interstate.
That'll do it.
That will do it. So that's not your fault.
It's not. No,
So
I do not control the traffic.
It's not like you planned that. But I think I should probably do the podcast standing up just to stretch my legs after being in the car for an hour and a half.
That's brutal. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm here.
We're here, and we're going to have a good conversation.
We always do. And today we're talking about raises.
Let's get some more money.
Well, why not, right? I mean, you work hard. I work hard. All of our listeners, they want just a little bit more. We all do.
Yeah, for sure, especially with costs going up, inflation.
Hey, inflation doesn't ask for a raise. It just
just
goes.
does it.
It just does it on its own.
So we've got to really be hoping that the bosses are listening to this podcast
Yes.
and hear our pleas for a little bump.
Yes, and you got to maybe a big bump. It just depends. You got to go large, and then hopefully meet
A
in the
little
middle.
negotiation.
A little negotiation there. Yeah.
What is your key to negotiation?
I'm not going to reveal my secrets.
Oh, come on.
No,
You got to give something.
No.
Do you go into a negotiation, maybe not with this boss, but with
Yeah.
any kind of consumer transaction you have? Do you go in starting off really strong, or do you try to do more of the get more flies with honey kind of attitude?
That's a great question. It really depends on who you're dealing with. There's some personalities that you go in there and just kind of like you said, you kind of gently, massage the conversation. Some personalities that you're dealing with, you got to go in there, boom, and start at the top. So it really kind of depends on who you're dealing with. But
what do you prefer to do? Do you feel more comfortable with one or the other?
Once again, it kind of depends. I mean, who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, and also you don't want to offend the person you're dealing with by going in there in astronomical, crazy numbers.
I need a $3 million contract.
Yeah, right. And I'm walking if I don't.
Bye-bye.
So
See you later.
LendingTree did an interesting little survey and about how to ask for a raise and some interesting statistics about who's getting the raise, who's not getting the raise. Gen Zers play a big part in that. So today we're talking to Matt Schultz. He is from LendingTree, and he joins us from Austin, Texas. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great. How are y'all?
We're doing great. Y'all.
We got a y'all in there.
Oh, we got a y'all in there. Hey, listen, Matt, when was the last time you got a raise?
Cost of living raise last year.
Cost of living raise. That seems to be, well, if you're getting one of those, I mean, you're actually not doing bad.
Not such a bad deal.
Was there a lot of negotiation on your part?
Not particularly, no.
It's like take it or leave it, Matt.
That's how it is a lot of times. And honestly, with the few years that we've been through with, inflation and unemployment and all that sort of stuff, I wasn't going to fight it too hard.
Right. Hey, LendingTree discovered in their survey that 82% of full-time workers who asked for a raise actually got one. 82%. That's a surprising number.
It's a really big number, and it shows just how so many times it's worth taking the chance to ask for something like that. Because I always say that you should ask. The worst thing that can happen is that they say no. But a job situation and salaries and promotions and that sort of thing is a little more perilous than some of the things that you can ask for, because if you've got the wrong boss, you're in the wrong company or the wrong timing, people can think you're ungrateful or whatever, stuff like that. So there certainly is some risk involved in there, but the fact that our survey found that 80+% of people who asked for a raise got one should tell you that it's not just the top of the line performers and the most hardcore negotiators who are getting their way.
How much of a raise are we actually talking about? What are people actually being able to add to their paychecks?
Generally, it's $5,000 or less, but we've certainly seen a fair number of people who ask for and receive five figures plus. So it really just kind of does depend on, I mean, a million different things, but what salary you're starting with, how good a year you had, all that sort of stuff.
Even $5,000. I mean, that's a big jump in a paycheck for a ton of people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It could change a lot of people's lives. I mean, depending on what you do. I did find that one number that was very striking and surprising at the same time was 24% of workers, about a quarter, actually went down in salary. They didn't get a raise. They just went backwards.
Yeah, and one of the interesting, taking a little deeper dive into that, one of the interesting things was that you saw some people who did that voluntarily, whether it was to avoid a layoff or whether it was because they were so stressed out and exhausted by their current job that they left for another job that paid a little bit less. So that was one of the real interesting aspects of this survey was how a lot of people valued mental health enough to make it to where they sometimes took a lower salary.
We have a new administration coming in. Not quite sure exactly when LendingTree did the survey, but what's the expectations of people out there when it comes to income? I think the last thing said that 37% or 65% expect their pay to increase the next year.
I don't think that number will change, at least in the short term, because we'll just need to see what the new administration does. There's certainly a lot of debate among economists and experts in terms of what the impact of some of the most talked about moves will be in terms of inflation and some other things like that. And then you factor in stuff like potentially closing down agencies, putting more people out of work. There's just more so maybe than any other change of administration that I remember. There's a whole lot of questions. And I think a lot of people tend to give the benefit of the doubt in these situations, for better or for worse, and are going to kind of see how it all plays out.
So help us gear up for this conversation. We know that people who ask for a raise actually have a really good chance of getting one. What do we need to do to prepare to have this conversation with our boss for ourselves?
Well, really, the most important thing that you need to do is do your homework and understand where your salary stands in relation to other people out there who do what you do. And the good news is that it's never been easier to find that information, whether you look online or whether you take advantage of the fact that more people are willing to be open about talking about their salary than ever before, which is a really good thing. But the more you can go in knowing your worth into that conversation, the better off you'll be. And I wrote a book called Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More. And we talk a little bit about salary negotiation and that sort of thing. And in the course of writing the book, one of the most interesting things that people told me who spend a lot more time in this space than I do was that the old idea of he who gives the first number loses is no longer a thing anymore. It's all about knowing your worth. So that's really the central thing is understanding your worth, what your value is to that company, and then going about quantifying what you did to prove that value.
I think there's also that thing that you go into a negotiation knowing if I have to be replaced, if I do decide to leave this job, it is going to be costly for my employer to hire somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a training period. There's the interview process that requires a flight maybe and a hotel stay and all of these things. So there is that little confidence boost that says it might be a little costly to replace me. Let's talk through this.
Yeah. Yeah. And
and again, you have value, and that's true whether, I mean, if you're talking about your rent increasing, it costs more for your landlord to replace you, and they could end up losing a couple of months of rent. So it's in their interest to keep you around and keep you happy. And the job market is so tight now. And generally speaking, if your company thinks that you're doing a good job, you have a lot more power maybe than you think, even in difficult times. Because really, that can even be about the best time to pursue a negotiation about salary, because the last thing that a company wants in a really difficult time is to lose A players.
In my generation, and probably yours, Susan, how much you made was basically only known between you and your employer or your spouse.
Very private.
Very private. But on a recent podcast that you and I did, we had a discussion kind of similar to this topic, but it was revealed that a lot of the younger generation, they tend to share what they make with each other. So there's a lot more information out there given by your peers.
It's such a fascinating shift because it is such a mindset that I think it wasn't so much that I need to know how much you're making or the next person down the hall is making to know my value, because I feel like I know my value, but it just felt like a very private number regardless.
But now
it's so open and it's so fascinating.
Yeah. How much do you make? Well, I make around, they're just the younger people, they're just sharing all that information.
I haven't done it yet. You're right. My husband is the only person. Well,
and
my
my
parents know how much money I make because I talk to them a lot about money.
Sure.
But for me, I'm still in that kind of old mindset of
it's a closed, closed circle.
I know.
And honestly, it's a good thing. And there's a lot that's said about millennials and Gen Z about being entitled and asking for too much too soon and all that kind of stuff. I actually see it the other way. I actually see it as these folks are coming out and being brave enough to ask for what they deserve and what they think they should get. And a lot of Gen Xers like myself and older, maybe there's a little bit of jealousy there that we didn't do that when we were younger, and we wish that we had. And honestly, I think it's a good thing, and more power to them, because it's going to serve them well in the long run.
So the big number, 82% of people who asked for a raise actually got one. That's very encouraging, I think, for a lot of our listeners. And I thought it was also interesting, according to LendingTree, that men are more likely to ask for a raise than women. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's pretty consistent when we've seen about asking for any sort of breaks in different sort of scenarios over the years. Men tend to be a little bit more willing to take that risk, or at least to tell us that they took that risk. There's always the chance that there's a little bit of bluster going on there and they're not actually doing it. But we've pretty consistently seen that women, over the course of the various surveys that we've done, have tended to be a little more cautious, a little less willing to take risks such as these for any number of reasons. And it's unfortunate because it can end up holding them back and limiting what they can potentially make going forward.
Gen Zers, ages 18 to 27. I'm certainly not in that category.
Nor am I.
That was many moons ago.
I'm sure they're having so much fun right now.
They are. 18 to 27, I remember that age gap, right? I mean,
it was great.
I had my first job in television.
There you go. Same.
Yeah. So exciting time. But
can you believe that people trusted us to be?
I know.
reporters
I
when we
know.
were 22.
Do you remember some of the mistakes that you made
Oh,
on
my
air?
goodness.
Oh my goodness.
I one time made the police chief of Utica, New York, as blue as a Smurf because I forgot to white balance my camera.
Oh no.
And I came back to the station. We had to use it. It was like a really important story. I think it was on a murder scene or something.
Yeah.
And this man was bright blue.
Oh.
I felt so bad.
Oh my goodness.
He fortunately had a good sense of humor, called me up and said, I've never looked like that before on camera.
Yeah. Any factual mistakes or anything when it comes to like journalism, reporting, everything? I mean, I've messed up so many people's titles. I've called, justice of the peace judges who don't need a degree, by the way, superior court judges. But that was
Back then
that was
when
in my
you're just learning.
straight out of college, Lubbock, Texas. Mistakes were more forgiving back then. So you can't make those now.
No, not now. But it is always such a good learning experience, yes.
Yeah.
But it does blow my mind sometimes when I think back of how much responsibility we had.
Yeah. When you asked for your first raise, were you just nervous as anything?
I remember my first negotiation for my first TV job.
Oh.
And they gave me a number that was very small because the first salary for TV reporters is next to nothing.
Right.
And I think I negotiated an extra $500 a year. So that turns out to be like 6 cents per paycheck after taxes.
It's not much at all. I'm not a math
But
guy,
for me, it felt like I was like, you feel like you have to do a little of the back and forth, but I knew the budget wasn't really going to stretch.
Yeah. So you were just like, I'll take the $500 and just
Here
do
we
it.
are.
Oh my gosh! And then you committed yourself for 5 years, probably.
No, I didn't actually. But yes, the $500 was a hilarious back and forth.
Look how far you've come.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Negotiating for $1,000.
Hey, what about remote workers, Matt? I think you said 57% of remote workers need a raise.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting aspects of it too, because working remotely is, the financials of working remotely versus in office can be very different. And one of the interesting things in the survey was that we found that the most common response when we asked people if they preferred to work fully in person, fully remote, or a mix of the two, the most common answer was actually fully in office. And I was a little surprised by that. But there's no question that wherever you're working, you're certainly looking for a little bit of a raise just because inflation, prices are still rising, even if it's slowing down a little bit.
One of the last things we'll talk about, and that is the pay raise that people are looking for. And this was interesting that LendingTree discovered. 20% of people who want a raise, they want less than $5,000. Okay, so that's about 1/5 of people want less than $5,000. 36%, which is the biggest one, they want $5,000 to $10,000.
That's a big deal. I mean, I said $5,000 is a big deal. $10,000 is a huge deal.
Yeah, 36% of people who want to raise want between $5,000 to $10,000 on top of what they're making. 19% want between $10,000 and $15,000 on top of what they're making. 16%, and now it starts going downhill because it starts getting
unrealistic.
Unrealistic. 16% want between $15,000 and $20,000, and then 10%, the smallest amount, they want $20,000 more.
I mean, I want that, but do I think I'm getting that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What you want and what you get are certainly, not in the same category. What do you think about those gaps there?
I think to a degree it depends obviously on how much money you make, and if you're making $250 a year, then maybe asking for 10 to 15 is not that big of a deal. But it really there is value in swinging for the fences a little bit, because we all know that the first offer that you get back from a company is never the final offer that you get. So there's always a little room to assume a little bit of negotiation. But the tricky part is just making sure that you don't that you don't overdo it and either look silly or just outright offend the person that you're talking to where they're like, okay, you're just being greedy. There's no chance.
Yeah.
So that there's definitely a little bit of an art to that.
There is a tightrope that you have to walk, because if you're making, say $20,000 a year, you can't go in there and say, I want a $20,000 raise on top of that.
Like double the salary,
but
please.
Exactly, you can't double it. But like you said, Matt, I mean, it's a little bit more viable for someone who's making, say, $250,000. It's the
percentage.
The percentage there kind of makes a little bit more sense. Hey,
well, and also something to consider is if you are making less money than what is the average for what somebody who does what you do nationally or locally, depending on the nature of your job. If the average person in your role makes 75 a year and you're making 55, then you can probably make the argument that maybe you deserve a $20,000 raise
or go somewhere else.
And that's really the next step, is that if that company isn't willing to pay you standard rate, then it's telling you a little bit about that company, and maybe it's time for you to go.
Yeah, that's great information. Great conversation too. I hope this kind of encourages people to, don't go in there, asking for crazy money. But I mean, you have to ask.
Well, it's empowering, right?
It is empowering, and I think it's good points that we kind of let our listeners in on. Hopefully, they'll take advantage of it. Susan?
And then we want the kickback.
Yes. Yeah, we want a commission.
10% off the top.
Right?
That's all we're asking
Come
for.
on.
Hey, Matt Schultz, if people want to find out more about you or your book or LendingTree, how do they find you?
You can find me. My website is mattschultz.com. I'm on socials at @bymattschultz, BY Matt Schultz. And I also have a monthly newsletter that I put out that you can find at my website. And if you sign up for it, you get 3 free sample scripts from my book to help you make a little bit more money, keep a little more of your money, and just kind of get a sample of what the book's about.
Yeah, and Schultz is with no T, just so our viewers and listeners realize that. Schultz with no T.
Correct.
All right, Matt. Listen, we appreciate you being on the On Your Side podcast. What's the weather like down in Austin?
It's beautiful. It's a little chilly. Summer finally ended after a long October, so we are in the 70s and sunny.
Yeah, we're in the sweater weather here in Phoenix. So
at 70s also.
Yeah, it's 70s. Yeah, so it's awesome. All right, enjoy your weekend or your day, and have a great day. Thanks again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can't, send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock. And every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.